Hello and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are y'all doing?
Pretty good.
Doing good. Holiday season and everything starting to wrap up, getting fat and everything. Got our holiday brews and things. Cheers, everybody.
Yeah, I get to go to work tomorrow. Yay.
Same here.
All through the holidays. Got Christmas off though, so that was good. So we are back with another Ashes of Creation show. It's been a little bit since we've done one, several weeks, largely just because there's not much to talk about. There was, however, a live stream which touches on a lot of different things. So we got hopefully enough to cover an hour's worth of show, I think. Diggs, you are obviously always the one that is, or I assume you are still the one who likes to hang out in various chats and things like that. Maybe? You're muted. Cannot hear you now. So
Can't hear you either. Yeah.
we will just maybe go over the live. Yeah.
Right now. Yes?
All right.
Yeah.
Now we hear you. All right.
Now we don't. So we're just going to take it from there. So we're just going to go down the live stream discussion thread. I don't think we've ever mentioned ashespost.com. I think probably anyone who follows the game closely already knows about them. They do transcripts of everything. So thank you. And that is what I always use. So definitely check them out for information. So we were actually going to maybe do this show last week, but we were waiting to see if I forget what he calls it, the creative producer, I don't know.
Creative director's letter.
Yeah, at the end of the year. I guess technically they still have 2 days, but that has not yet come. So we're just going to do the show anyways. So anything, I was just going to go top to bottom on this live stream. I don't know if there's anything that stuck out to either of you as interesting to start with.
Well, I mean, they did kind of go over that 5K test and talk about it and all of that stuff. And it's one of those things where I just wonder how effective of a test it is and what exactly, are the nitty gritty components that are being looked at here, because I don't know if this is also dealing with all of the draw calls of a character with face customized a certain way and equipment customized a certain way. And not just one of them, but hundreds of them coming over the ridge into your large settlement of however many people that are there, player and NPC, and how it's going to handle all of that. Obviously, this is a technique that I've seen them do in PlanetSide and other SOE and Daybreak games, where when things need to deal with a large load of things, they dumb down the models to just like the stupid simplest versions possible, make the fewest polys, fewest draw calls, fewest moving parts that has to deal with, and slowly res them in as needed, even to the point where I want to say PlanetSide 2, it wouldn't actually show you everyone on the battlefield unless they are considered a threat, which then caused problems when a sniper could shoot you, but you literally couldn't actually address them in any way. That's a different issue. On a different engine, in fact, one that's less stable. So this is much better.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say it's bare bones anyway.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, yeah, you look at the video, it's just one character and a bunch of red blobs. But
yeah,
it's interesting. But you mentioned that there was a question in the Q&A session. What was it? With the new backend infrastructure, does internal testing show that 10,000 players can still be achieved? Or will you need to dial that number back? And his response was that we have not dialed that back. Based on internal stress testing, they actually consider increasing it. And then he goes on to say player movement positioning is 85% of the network traffic. Spell effects all over the place are not that big of a deal. I don't know if the player movement positioning in the account is like, if that's all encompassing what you've mentioned. With rendering everything that you need to render, I guess I hear movement and I think of actual X, Y, Z positioning data, but I don't know.
Well, then, I mean, with all of that, if they think spell effects and projectiles and all of that sort of stuff is going to be, the easy stuff, well, let's see. I wonder what they've done to limit people's ability to release massive amounts of stuff, because that's just the first thing I think of is a bunch of people just firing simultaneously, and all of that stress testing just goes to waste because it's just one big rapid fire burst that it never catches up from. So obviously that's, we don't want that to be the case. We want everything to be as smooth as possible. And that's why all of this testing stuff is important. But, we'll test it more. We'll see more of it, I think. Honestly, I think a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about here, we're going to be starting to see where the rubber hits the road with the siege stuff, because this is going to be trying to take what they've got of this system, but actually apply it to moving parts in real time, and let's see how it goes.
And there are a couple of other things that were in the Q&A that sort of tie into that, the idea of having so many people in one space. There was a question about weapons. If one adds elemental effect to the weapon, either through spell or permanent buff from enchanting, will the effects be applied to the weapon? So the example was adding fire to a sword, and now my sword is on fire, or fire damage to a sword. You mentioned all the spell effects, but also, 5,000 other flaming swords dancing around. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I wish we could get our hands on it.
If a lot of that is just the particle rendering that we see locally on our side, and really all it's dealing with are just like cylinders and spheres and just like primitive volumes, then I could see how that would be kind of efficient on the server side, but could still even be taxing on the player side with all those effects.
There was a comment somewhere that any potato should run it, or something like that. So
I love hearing stuff like that, and then like all the edge case murderers come in. It's like, oh, my potato doesn't run this at all. Like the AMD cards from like 5 years ago that just broke on like 2D games for some reason.
I would feel better if they were doing tests in Apocalypse that would check to see how many people we could get in. It's been, I think February was the last time we did a check of trying to get 200 people in.
Apocalypse isn't compelling. Wow. We want the siege.
Tie into that, yes.
Well, I'm just saying, even just to do the stress test to see how many, you're talking 5,000, but last we had a hard time even with 200 live players. So I would love to see us have an opportunity to test that, even if it's just in the BR, even if it's just a day or a weekend or a couple of hours loading in.
But do you think they could get 200, even if they put a call out, hey, we want a stress test?
Yeah. If they did it in advance, like a week in advance, they could get 200 people for that.
Because I look at, I always track the Steam charts, and I wasn't getting the 4 players playing 2 hours ago, 16 in the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
And you go from October, the average concurrent was 86. November was 13. And the last month it's 7. And I think there's a lot of reasons. You've talked about that in chat, I think. For that, there's not a lot to do right now. All of the goals that they had set in place at this point have more or less probably been reached by most people.
Anybody active. Yeah.
So there's not even a real quest reason, reward reason to go in and keep playing right now, because most people have already maxed that out. There's just nothing new. Correct.
The new thing to do is to try to get to 1 million experience points.
Why? What's that?
Doesn't get you anything.
Yeah.
Which is why there are currently 4 people playing.
Right.
I don't know. I'm always.
If they wanted to pay every player 1 ember for every game they play, and you can start like earning that spendable cash, I'm sure people would do it and just like AFK out. That's still more people in it than they're doing right now.
You know, I don't know. I look at a lot of different things. So also, if we had time, there was a dev discussion. You know, there are reverse Q&A, Pantheon-like questions that drive me nuts. But typically there's been fair amount of feedback to that. But they posted that on December 19th. It took 2 days before they got to page 2 of responses, and they're still on page 2 of responses. So there's not a lot of interaction.
But that's a tough question, because the question is what keeps you coming back to games, and I don't think they're, especially on the Morg side, on the mmorpg side, I don't think a lot of people go back.
Yeah, I mean, when a lot of people, maybe when the next expansion comes, or when some friend of theirs starts playing it or something, they get back into it.
Yeah, we can talk
For
about
about
this.
a week.
It's fun.
For about a week?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a week on a month subscription, they still make their money.
I'm just saying.
Things are just very different. I feel like, because we can talk about that question. There is no game right now that I keep going back to. There are ones I think about going back to all the time. And I think I had put in our Discord, I talked about EverQuest just not too long ago, about installing it just to jump in. So that thought is always there, that urge.
Yeah. I mean, once every couple of years, I'll play Final Fantasy Tactics and Castlevania Symphony of the Night just because I think they're great games. I just love playing them. There's nothing new about them. It's literally just the same damn game. It's just the satisfying experience of playing through it again.
Mm-hmm. How often do you do that?
About once every 2 years or so.
Yeah.
Last time my brother and I did a speed run on Final Fantasy Tactics, maxing out character speed and movement, and man, that was dumb. I had never done it that way before, but you just all that positioning and ability, and yeah, it's dumb. It's super easy.
I mean, I would give 2 answers. One is the community, so the people you play with, coming back and playing with them over again for an MMORPG.
Yeah.
And the other would just be content updates. A game like EverQuest, they're still doing content updates, but what stops me from going back
is that it's still EverQuest.
Well, no, so I can get through the UI. I can even get through the questing system, I guess we can call it that. But it's not 1999. It's the nostalgia is still there, but there's no community for me to go to. So I would be looking at essentially, 2-boxing, 3-boxing myself through that whole game. And then I feel like also the content just sort of starts rehashing. I mean, I don't know how many expansions have Velius as a within the title. I'm pretty sure. I might be lying. I don't want to lie because apparently I lie about video games.
Oh no, the last one was the Blood of Luklan or whatever. So it's back on the moon.
Is it that's what I was going to look up? No.
Yeah. So.
Not EverQuest. Torment of Velius.
Okay, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there's every time WoW puts out an expansion, I always see people I know getting after it.
Well, Saga's usually able to convince me to try playing it for a little bit, and I play for a couple of days, and then still.
And I think, and the big 3 reasons is your community still there too. It's an easy game to play. I mean, I can work through the UI of EverQuest, which is essentially unchanged. The quest system, instead of having to type everything, I'm pretty sure you can click on certain words now. But it's not an ease of use system. People vast majority of people will look at that and not at all want to do it. I don't even think graphics are the issue. I mean, there are plenty of low poly games that are amazing games that are successful today. So I don't even think necessarily graphics are the problem with everyone says we'll just revamp the graphics and people will come back. I don't necessarily agree with that. But for like WoW, yeah, it's easy to do. And then you have the community there. And then it's also just been so popular for so long that the nostalgia factor is much closer. Someone who quit playing WoW 2 years ago versus someone who quit playing EverQuest 15 years ago, I think is just a very different mindset, different experience.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think it might be a problem with all three of us, and probably four of us, is that I'm kind of tired of the theme park. It's just being a theme park. And one, running out of quests, and then two, you can kind of feel that, especially in WoW, it's the same activity with just different story, kind of. So it feels like you're retreading. You're on a treadmill again, and you've popped back on the treadmill, and it's like that. Okay, I already did all this stuff. It's just, 100 times XP, 100 times the health. But really, it's the same thing I did 2 years ago.
They're going to have a new leveling system.
They're not adding any new modes to the gameplay, really. They aren't adding any new features or facets. There'll be like maybe a slight variation in the presentation that's interesting initially, but then it just becomes the same old really fast. Like that's, yeah. You just gotta keep changing it up.
I think also for me, I don't feel like I'm really playing my class or playing my race. Like anybody could go in and defeat these same quests.
Like your character is totally disconnected from the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going in as a druid or a rogue, or it doesn't matter what my race is or what my class is.
No, it's
to the story itself.
It's
and it doesn't impact the world.
It's a thing where I always say how like MMOs, it's everything people ever wanted, like D&D, but in like a world where everyone can play. But then it's also like I see it as being kind of the inverse. It is the curse of, well, we had to cut all the corners we could to let everyone play in the world, and as a result, we completely like neutered everything about why you would actually want to role play in this world or be able to even. Nothing is responsive. It's, nothing cares about what you do.
Or how you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I feel like Blizzard's done a fairly good job at disguising the fact that they're reusing concepts over and over again. Like that, if you don't pay too much attention, if you don't care, you don't care. But world quests and just the way they've sort of rehashed some of those things to present them differently. Like daily quests, become world quests. Like they've done a fairly, I think, good job introducing weapons that you level over time. I mean, it's the same thing, sort of.
Yeah, but the thing is, everything also just being a completely inflexible environment that only changes when the developers change it. There's nothing fun to that. There's no like give and take battle of like having battle lines in the real world and gaining and losing territory. There's none of that. It's not, even if there was, I wouldn't expect it to be to the extent where it would actually really matter very much. And that's the thing that's kind of sad about it. I really, really wish that, there was something that they had kind of done somewhere along the way to try to make the fact that you're all playing in the world together not just be, this repetitive, loot grind and, PvP fest or what. I guess actually PvPers are probably that are getting the most well because every battle is still unique. How people approach the fight, who does what, the different angles and stuff. It's all going to be way more dynamic than a static encounter that you've already played 100 times, or other people have already played 100 times and written a guide, and you just did it once perfectly on your first time. I kind of want to bring it back though, because that's kind of the things that we're really, really hoping to see be alleviated with Ashes. That obviously we're not going to be able to see the full extent of it in siege mode. It's just going to be here's an encounter, do it as you can. At the very least, unlike the Battle Royale, instead of just being a funnel to the center with, jumping around and playing like you're some sort of, you know, space Jedi or something, instead of like actually being a, you know, a good sort of fighter who has to expend energy to jump or dodge around or anything like that, exert themselves, have weight to the character. You know, adding that sort of stuff, bringing it to like more of a regular sort of battle, actually having the ability to express tactics over a long period of time, rather than I see someone, I kill someone, I died. That's going to be fun. I think that's going to be nice and helpful for the game. And honestly, it gives them an opportunity, because we've seen like the way they kind of build the world. There's room for visual storytelling. There's also, they could actually make interactable object books and stuff that, like, well, there is a siege going on, but you know, if you want to be a jerk, you can go over to this bookcase and read some lore for a moment. They could sneak some of that in just to be fun.
Yeah, I think, though, for me, one of the problems I have with EQ is how many times can I kill Fippy Darkpaw and he's still going to be there?
Yeah, that's a reason I don't, you know, the grind.
Yeah. Well, not even the grinds. Just if I kill Fippy, I want eventually for him to die. I don't want, you know, week after week, month after month, year after year for the same NPC that I've killed to remain there.
For your account to be flagged that, okay, you've killed Fippy once, he'll never appear for you.
Yeah, it should change the story. And then again with World of Warcraft, I don't know, when I played a Forsaken, that made me feel a certain way, just going in and not caring much for humanity. I'm going to turn everybody into undead. I would like to play the expansions with that same kind of racial mindset, and have that having some impact on the story, or the NPCs react to me a certain way because that's the way I've been playing. So I think the key for me is that, and I think that's why we're looking towards games like Ashes and games like Chronicles of Illyria, is because death should matter even for the NPCs. Also, hopefully, we'll be actually influencing and changing the world. The world will be evolving over time rather than remaining static.
And they kind of talk about that in the Q&A, the idea that they aren't individualized quests. There isn't like a main story where you're treated as the one hero. It's more the players are the movers and the shakers, that things are kind of, and I think, again, this I use D&D as an analogy. There's a world that exists and things are basically in a state of equilibrium until you, the player, you know, exert your influence over it and disrupt the flow of things and set things in motion. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see, is that NPCs will be able to get things up to a point and open up the opportunities for situations maybe, but it's really the players who are actually driving the action. They're the ones moving the goods. They're the ones sabotaging the caravans. They're the ones that are over hunting near an area so that people have to, you know, trade for their food or whatever. All of that stuff.
Also kind of quasi hoping that we can see some advances in the NPCs, maybe as the nodes move from stage to stage.
Yeah, I mean, that's supposed to happen. Is if the difficulty of the area increases with the node, I think it's safe to expect that the NPCs will be of a higher quality or whatever. That might not mean that the town blacksmith is going to be able to whoop your ass the same way that, you know, the guards will, but that the guards will be better at being guards and the blacksmiths will be better at being blacksmiths. It's not just like, oh, well, everybody's level 60 now and everybody will just one-shot you because you're a lowly character and they're NPCs. You shouldn't have done that. I always hated that in MMOs too, but they have to do it because it's not your world to go and kill everybody. It's everybody's world to share.
Right. And it should be that case anyway, because as the node pops to a newer level and all of the buildings get an upgrade, that's one of the things that I'm looking for, that the blacksmith shop will get an upgrade as well. Right.
Yeah,
even in appearance.
Yeah, all of everything across the board should get at least a little bit better for everybody, if not significantly better. And I would imagine how much it gets better in, differentially is relative to potentially conditions, who the people are that are running it, and what their affinity towards different things is. If they have a focus towards, more blacksmiths or more tax collectors or something. And then, of course, what sort of technology they're dealing with there will also influence the probably who's getting more of the love when the upgrades happen.
Well, and the fun aspect of that with Ashes will be if it pops to a different race, because then we might not have the same blacksmith, and might have a smithy in the same spot, but we might not have the same blacksmith, and that blacksmith might not be selling the same stuff, or have the same enchantments or whatever. So that could be fun, and that's hopefully going to, as an explorer, that should hopefully keep me running across the map, seeing what's new.
The transition. He commented on this a couple of times. As nodes advance, has always been a question. They seem to be doing some things in a clever way. We already saw the random positioning of buildings. They kind of talked about that again, just not even for each node. Like not every, say, military node will have the same, random, but everyone will be different. Like hundreds of different. Every node will have some sort of different transition, which is cool. There was a mention of if you're close to the shore, that it's not even necessarily just within that one specific defined node, but also a harbor might pop up over time that you have to defend. It's kind of outside of that immediate sphere. So those sorts of things are interesting. They mentioned how the level of the monsters will increase. It won't be immediate. You'll have to kill out whatever's left, and then as those die, they'll be replaced with ones that are of higher level. I think that's a smart way to go about that too. Is just feeling that sort of slow transition, rather than a snap of the fingers and the world changes sort of approach. Those things sound interesting. The NPCs, mentioned how that should also change and evolve with time. I was kind of curious. They commented that I think it's on the low side. It takes 12 to 15 hours to craft an NPC. They do mention that obviously as they create more models, they'll be able to take pieces. They won't have to start from scratch.
Right.
But even then, just thinking 12 to 15 hours per NPC, and you have how many different races and how many, just all these different things that they're trying to character model, and all of the different animals that they're going to have to monsters and everything else, since each node will have to be different from one another. It seems like a lot of work.
Seems like a lot of work, and it seems to be going a little slowly since we only get one model per month that we get, or maybe two that we get a chance to see.
We don't get to see all of the progress, I bet.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things, I have two forum questions or forum topics that came up the last few weeks. One was somewhat, and it might even have been a question here. I don't remember where it was asked, but will the buildings that we have, will there be a racial impact? Like, will dwarves be able to build a great forge, and that'll have some how will, because I think when we get to a metro, each metro gets a major building or a major service that gets applied to the node, and they were wondering if something is similar with race. And I'm kind of thinking that it should be that there should be different options based on which race is monopolizing or dominating that node. Like, I would hope that if dwarves are there, they have the option to build a great forge, and maybe if orcs would probably, like Vec would probably build an observatory, maybe those options wouldn't be available if different races are dominating. I don't know. What do you guys think about racial influence on buildings that we build?
It would be nice to see, but I'm not sure how much it should be, something that's like hard set, like this is the only things that are within this category, or if it's more, well, you've got this portion of people that do this, you got this portion of people that do that, you've got this focus within your guild, so here's some of the options that are available, and the ones that are the same that you would find somebody else making are going to be of the same quality. So it might be that you've got more of one race, but the ones that make something else more is more of their signature sort of thing. You can still make a whatever that's going to be able to craft the same sort of stuff, just maybe you don't have the actual people to make the most of it, perhaps.
Well, I guess
it seems like you wouldn't want to do that.
Well, I guess when I think about it a little bit more in detail, Dunir or dwarves or mountain dwarves, and under mountain dwarves, or even Tolnar, I would think they would not be building observatories, whereas Vec would be. So, again, I would think
that does make a point. Yes.
Right. There's no reason even to have an observatory. I mean, most places will probably have some kind of smithy. But I don't know if they would have a forge maybe as grand as the Dunir might have, or something. Of course,
like if you've got an observatory built into a mountain, then that could be pretty awesome too.
Yeah, but just I would think dwarves might not be into looking for that. They'd want to look underground instead of into the sky.
I mean, if you're gonna have
and the cooling might be different.
A ruling group, you mentioned as one goes up in tier that they can switch. I mean, it would make sense to me that whoever's the majority would have the majority influence. Maybe not all the buildings, but on these big things, yeah. My question would be is after it gets, say, tier 4 and it's a different race, do they keep some of the older previous structures maybe as a ruin or something just to show who was there previously?
Well, cool. I mean, if the structure still works, I think you have the option to not tear it down and just use what exists.
Well, see, that's what I'm not sure. I don't know what options we have, because you get to now which tier, at some point you get to select a building, right? They will have random positioning of generic buildings, but then there will be spots. When they showed us that building tool, there will be certain spots that are left blank that players can choose. Whoever's the mayor can choose what goes there.
There's two kind of contexts to look at. One is when it upgrades from one tier to the next, where I believe a lot of that placement will be done automatically, but then some amount of manual placement and some amount of given the freeholds to people, so they can just kind of do their own thing.
Yeah, but even town. So like if we're building a library, we could choose the government could choose to build a library in town. And I think that starts at the town level, town and then city and then metro.
But what's not clear, I guess, is what happens to those things at the next stage.
I don't know that they get eliminated. I think they just kind of get upgraded and remain in place.
But the real question, and I think, by the way, Steven says that he's anticipating doing another round of interviews in March. So you need to be on top of that. But what happens to a library if it changes from Nakua to Vec? It goes from a Nakua city to a Vec metropolis. What's in the library? I don't know. Is it Nakua stuff or Vec stuff?
Maybe the library expanded so big that it can have all the old stuff in just one wing of it. I don't know. That's a good question. Is it something where, well, we're the ones in charge now, so we automatically erase the culture that was there before? I could see a lot of problems with going with that model.
I still wish, I hope that there will be this subtle transition of things like this that you'll notice, hey, books are starting to disappear or new ones are starting to appear. I doubt that's what we're going to end up getting because it seems like such a technical thing to overcome.
Also, it means people have to write all those books.
Well, we're using books loosely, I guess, but I mean, even the structures, the smith or a smithy, for example. I'm sure there will be different types of metalworking. I'm sure. So, does that mean the previous race? What happens to that smith? Does he stay? Does she turn into a different person altogether? Do the patterns that are being made there change? These are things we don't really know. Yeah. The immersion, the immersion factor in me wants to say, you don't just kick them out, that they're still there. Now, it might be that people stop using them because now you have a majority other group and they want a different type. And so over time, they sort of phase out and their shop does close. But I get the sense what we're going to get is just sort of a snap of the fingers and things will just sort of rapidly change, which is fine. You'll get used to it. But
I don't know. For some reason, I imagine anything where the building itself wasn't destroyed like in a siege, that you would expect the previous occupants and their tools and technology to remain there until somebody, either the mayor or whoever is in charge, walks in and says, all right, you're done, get out.
Yep, but what the article tells us, I believe, is that it's going to pop to the next race. So those NPCs will be gone.
Because then how do you know what's the majority, right? I mean, part of knowing what the
just because it's popped to the next race doesn't mean
around you.
Doesn't mean that the crafter that was there before necessarily has to be kicked out. It may mean that there's new people in the workshop that weren't there before, and eventually they get phased out.
I mean, that's not what the article tends to.
No, that's true. It definitely does kind of read like, yeah, we're just, whoever's in charge is in charge, but.
I mean, I feel bad for Bob the bartender, man. You're going to have to share stories with him, and he's just going to one day go, and you're never going to see him again.
Well, that's why we have to raise it down and bring him back.
But it would be random, so you might not get Bob back.
That's actually very weird now that you mention it, the idea that there's actually no permanency of the non-player characters, that they only exist while the structure and the conditions where they were created for exists. And then after that, you can't take them anywhere. You can't recruit them or hire them, or otherwise you don't the address to their next of kin or anything like that. They're gone. I actually don't like that as much, to be perfectly honest. I actually like the idea that NPCs persist and they migrate and they have history, and you've knocked this person's house down 3 times or whatever. Then you come into the shop where they're at and you buy a sword from them, and they make sure they give you the one that's going to shatter on like one good hit.
Right.
Like that's what I would be hoping to see, or the one that it always looks like it's sharp but it ends up just dulling real fast or whatever. The idea that you can actually have some amount of history with the characters, and that things actually matter beyond just who's the last person to kick over the person in charge here.
Yeah, it would be nice, now that you mentioned that, to be able to add flaws onto weapons and gear, in addition to buffs and positive skills.
We never get to meddle with things like that. Oh yeah, no, the blade's never going to break, but as soon as you hit something with it, it's going to rattle your hand. Just balance it.
Speaking of augments, they had mentioned, it sounded super interesting. I'm really curious how it works. They mentioned a tool, and of course now I can't find. It was a tool for creating augments. Here it's they're creating a tool that quickly creates skills and abilities, and things like that. Include the broader augment system. Part of me think that's really neat that you can kind of create skills quickly. The other part of me is, okay, well then how generic are they going to be? Like if you're creating a tool that just sort of smacks together strength plus fire damage, okay. But that's sort of a lot of what these other random weapons that you get already
I
exist
think
in
it
other
just
games.
makes it easy to make something an AoE, or is it a cone, or is it there's certain parameters like that that's going to be, is it a ranged, is it melee? I think that kind of makes sense.
I don't know why I don't like that. And I feel like because skills are so important in my non-developer head of, you remember certain qualities and features that are distinct. Maybe a tool doesn't have anything to do with that and does not change that. I don't know. It just sounds very generic to have a tool that just creates your skills.
Well, helps you create your skills. It makes it quicker to do. So again, like if it's just setting parameters to put it into specific categories, then that makes it quick. They don't have to start everything from scratch every time.
I don't know. I just, in my heart of hearts, picture someone in a back room smoking a cigarette, drinking some beer, talking about ideas, and they come up with Spirit of the Wolf, or they come up with Journeyman boots. These sort of real classic Kodiak's endless intellect. These sort of really meaningful skills that people, strive to have. I don't know. Technology advancement. It's cool. And what do I know? So there was actually this last week, there were two. Oh, and there was a question that made me think of this. There was a question, a very technical question, which you don't really see. And you always wonder, is this somebody that knows something or they just read something? And it was UE4 4.24 has been released. And there is one feature, which is hair and fur rendering and simulation. Will AOC take advantage of this? And basically he says no, and I think rightly says that just because something comes out doesn't mean it's good to use. But there was an article, and I cannot remember which. It was actually a well-known news site, and it was a female developer that wrote it. It was an opinion piece, basically talking about I'm a developer. I know what I'm doing. You're a gamer. We love you and we want you to be happy. You do not know what I do. And it's very disrespectful, some of the things, because you don't understand. And then there was a tweet, and I'm terrible with names. I cannot remember. He was another developer who basically screenshotted a couple of responses to one of his messages that was in the same vein of, gamers, of course, know everything, and they'll tell you that they know everything, and they'll tell you how everything is wrong. And I saw that question, and I guess my own tiny head about a tool for skills. It's a good perspective to put yourself back and say, I don't do this for a living.
I don't know. I mean, crafting the attack-based cantrips in the D&D games, it's like, well, either it's something where you have to roll to save, or somebody chucking, then choose an element, and then choose the damage that it does, and then maybe it has some other special effect. Boom, bam, that's easy. And then trying to balance within that, you could or not. You can kind of fudge the numbers a little bit. You're using, a series of D4 through D20, so you have ranges to play with and things to kind of fudge a little, and it's fine. But it's the crafting of abilities that there's. I'm hoping a lot more to it than just like what's the shape of it and what's the element and what's the damage, but that there's actually some thematic combinations that are being provided, like being able to combine things in a way that synergizes, try to immobilize enemies so you play or get in on them, or, whatever it is that you're not even your archetype, but just like your play style, and relative to that, whatever character and subclass you chose, how that plays and how that works, and that things are actually compelling and meaningful combinations rather than just slapdash. Well, anything can be mixed with anything, and that's just the system. I did want to say though on the UE4 thing, that's probably just someone who works in Unreal Engine and is excited for the game. Realistically, I don't think any multiplayer game is, and most games, in fact, aren't on the latest build of whatever engine they're using. You update because you have to, because they introduced a feature that you needed, or something that you were using that you were hoping to continue using now isn't going to be able to work anymore, and you have to update. But it generally does not pay off to stay up to the latest build, because you have to transfer everything over. Everything works, do all of your unit tests and everything, and in doing so, you kill your productivity, because they can come out with these updates at about the same time that you've just ported the build over to the new version, and you just do the whole damn thing again. So, I mean, that's got to be a certain kind of hell to try to chase the train like that, unless you're actually working at a first-party company, and those engine updates are your game's updates.
I hope you're right, because it read to me like someone who just read the patch notes and thought, hey, this sounds cool. I'm going to ask this question. But those, I'll have to find them. I'll put them in our Discord chat maybe, because it really, even for me, put in perspective. Yeah, I know I've taught myself basic coding. I'm not a developer. I'm not, I don't do that. And so when we do these shows, is trying to understand where my knowledge is and respect to where they are. It was just a good sort of self-check of, you know what, most of the time, now I don't think, I think there's a lot of people out there, and I don't hopefully fall into this group. It's like, well, you have Unreal, you have Unity, just do it, you know? Because on one hand, you get people, oh, you use all these plugins and you use speed trees, and that's terrible. On the other hand,
speed tree is the best.
On the other hand, you have this here, do it. Make our game, make it playable. Just do it. You can do it. You have all these things. You're muted.
Yeah, no, I love Speed Tree. I will go out and say that. Never bought it, never paid for it, never used it in a project, but I love everything that it's gone in. And you do too, because you don't know that he used Speed Tree. Movies, games, it's all over the place. Can't avoid it.
Yeah, I guess the main thing being, just because someone is using an engine doesn't mean it's all prepackaged for them.
Yeah. No, it's you know, it's funny you should say that, because a lot of the assets that were used in Fortnite were just kind of available on the Epic store, and someone I know for a game they were working on had to go through and reskin everything, because the assets their team was planning to use were a lot of the things that apparently were also being used in Fortnite. So whoops. But yeah, that's I mean, and that's definitely just a completely different, but kind of an interesting discussion. The topic of, at what point are you making an original, you know, game using purchased assets versus at what point are you just asset flipping? And there is a clear distinction between the two. From all the indie game streaming I've done, I've seen the difference. I can usually spot it pretty quick. Though one of them was so funny because it was from a country that doesn't work copyright laws, so they just literally put sprites and GIFs from everything in there. So, and Steam had it on it. So there were some other interesting, or before we go on, did anybody want to say anything else about those subjects? So, just kind of going down the list. Anything else that?
Well, there was one thing that we started to talk about that I guess are running towards the end, that I did want to go over, and it's this idea of the BR and whether they are completely finished at this point with anything related to the BR, whether we're already at a sort of maintenance mode for this quote game that they put out. There was a question. It's towards the end. Have there been any further iterations to combat since the last update on APOC? If so, what changes have you decided to make? And it was for the BR, no. But for Siege, yes. So that kind of says to me they're kind of done right now with the BR part of this. Moving on.
Diggs, you said that they've introduced more bugs recently.
You're
You're muted.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you. On location. We're gonna try to read lips here.
What? I think we might have got Mike. We got Mike and lost camera. Oh, there we go. All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a few things. One, yes, they introduced a new bug. The major new bug they introduced was falling through the ground. I think they tweaked a couple of weapons, like nerfed them, tweaked. But it's pretty much the same. In the last couple of dev streams, they have talked about the BR in past tense. So I think you are correct. They aren't doing very much maintenance on that. And they seem to be almost completely focused on Castle Siege. And games have capped at 5 people and have gone as low as 3 people. So, yeah, I think they aren't spending a lot of time thinking about the BR at the moment. I mean, all they did was increase the weeks. So they added 12 more weeks.
Okay. Breaking up.
Oh, they did not move. Whoops.
You're still there.
Oh, is my internet was the problem?
No, that's his.
Okay.
So, yes. So it would appear that we have moved on past this testing phase.
The battle royale. Yeah. But that's again, like, that's the part that kind of kills me is, you know, is there a test of different classes and they say you're playing it. We talked about Alpha 2 for player classes and mechanics. Well, if they're going to be putting it into Siege, then, you know, Siege and beyond, then that's all under Apocalypse. That's cool. But the way it is right now, no, nothing that I think we can test is in any way representative gameplay whatsoever.
There was another thing, actually, at the very beginning. They talked about the siege weapons. That's kind of threw me off a little bit. They basically said, so the lessons we learned building siege weapons contributes to the caravan mechanic, which seems very strange to me. I guess I imagine, because then they go on to say we want to ensure that each role class has a niche that fits into it. They mentioned the tank in the early test phase. The tank was overpowered. The mages were too squishy. I guess when I think of siege weapons, I think of a big a big turret or something that fires a big big bow, fires just a massive steel bolt into the walls. I don't envision this like cluster of people on the siege weapons, because that's how that reads to me. Because I picture caravans, people riding on the caravans, protecting the caravans. That seems very strange comparison or a way to test caravans through siege weapons. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I think caravan is more like a special designation that you've got this thing on wheels. And once you've gathered together and signed your little contracts for what roles everybody's going to be playing on it, it's able to set in motion, and you have to stay within a certain radius and defend it, and it's allowed to keep rolling and that sort of stuff. If everybody gets away from it, maybe it stops being defended properly and enemies get to do certain things to it, or gets considered abandoned, or, you know, I'm not exactly sure. I feel like that's kind of what it is like the not necessarily contract system, but like the party system that's required to start a caravan.
But how's that tested through siege weapons? That's what I don't understand. Because now I'm even questioning what are siege weapons.
They've shown it's like that launches stuff at the wall. They've talked about requiring multiple people to operate it. I think I don't know if it's like one person that's pulling the trigger, or one person that's or one or two people that are helping to load it, and however many people helping to like position it or whatever, plus however many people that are actually physically defending. And it could very well be that they're putting a limitation that you need to have at least 5 people before you can be designated a siege weapon, so people don't just grab them all willy-nilly, get them destroyed because they pulled it out solo. They couldn't even move it, and the enemies came and destroyed it. And that it's something where like the vehicle itself doesn't pop, or it doesn't get finished constructing, so you can actually roll it out until you actually have enough players to make a reasonable group that could actually get it out there, get it in position, defend it, and fire a few shots. So I could see how that would be how they would be testing the caravan system. Is just you need this many people before it's even allowed to be set in motion. Otherwise, the wagon master or the trebuchet master or whatever, you'd be like, nah, you don't get to take this out. We're just keeping it in the shed.
So, here's that makes sense. A couple of rapid things. Summoners will not be able to equip their pets with items. That is one of the things I loved about EverQuest, was being able to craft items to give to your pets. I wish they would change their mind there.
Well, you'll be able to have pets that you can equip, just
summoners' pets.
Summonables.
No, the summoners' pets. I love the idea of being able to, because other games have done it. I wish they would change their mind on that. There was another question that just made me laugh. I have to find. It was about the combination. It was the way it was, of different class and subclass. It says, in a raid or party situation, 40 man all the way down. If your main tank is, let's say, a tank, gets sent to bed by his mother, could a mage tank A hold aggro and B have the ability to live as a tank for the group? I just love the question, because the idea of mom sending the child to bed puts into perspective who will be playing this game. And also from the person that's asking the question. So I just love the question. I do think if you're going to be able to add a tank sort of role to any class, that combination should somehow be able to be a meat shield of some sort, which I guess he does kind of say that. The response was, you'll be able to do some tanking on some bosses for some time, but there's a lot of variables that go into that. So I like his answer, because I do think if you're going to have that combination, I mean, why else would you choose? Why else would you add that subclass to your class, if not to be able to be a meat shield of some sort? Which just raises all kinds of really cool questions. A mage tank sounds super interesting. A priest tank, I guess paladin, but
I always bring up my favorite example of a tanking ability on a wizard. The first caster they put in, Vindictus, Evie, has a shell she kind of puts on, and it can absorb some amount of damage, but because they also have a physics sort of effect, if something just really hauls off and smacks you, you just bounce around like a rubber ball across the arena. It's hilarious. And they're just like holding on for dear life in their little wizard shell. I like that. I like the idea of a mage who's actually focused their time and efforts and abilities, that they can just summon, ice wall after ice wall, or whatever it is that they can, tank as effectively as a tank, because they're able to put up the same amount of kind of barriers and defense between them and the opponent that, is relative to the amount of damage that the tank is just sitting there taking on the shield. But we'll have to see how the mechanics actually.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
We can. Yeah.
It's going to be tank plus anything will be able to act as the main tank, and then X plus tank as the secondary will be an off tank. That's basically the way it works.
2 answers to questions I did not like. One I can understand, but still do not like. There was a question about quests being immersive. So basically, how individualized will quests be? I didn't like the answer, which basically said we don't know. We have some tech things to do to see what is relevant to you and only you. That tells me they do not have that sort of system up yet, and they're not sure if they will be able to do that sort of thing. Which just goes to the idea of a living, breathing world. Because equally, there was a question about treasure hunts, which I read more as player created quests. Will you allow players to create treasure hunts that we can do within the game, which is essentially a quest? And the answer was no. Which again, I guess I can understand the technical side. I don't like the answer though. I'm kind of going through these fast. Stop and talk all you want.
Yeah, no, that unless you're looting treasure maps and you can't hand that to somebody else, that's a completely different story there.
I guess the last thing that I will there will be a bounty system, which is kind of cool for bugs. I don't know. Do other games advertise that?
Bounty system?
Yeah, you obviously see that with other major tech companies, right? People, Google and whatnot, Facebook, will have they'll pay you for bugs that you find, exploits that you find. This was a question to the game. Will they have some sort of reward structure for people to, let them know, hey, I found an exploit, I found a bug? The answer was yes. I don't know of anything that I've ever heard publicly, at least, about World of Warcraft or or any of these studios. I guess I don't know. Maybe that does exist. It's just not public.
Could be, or it could also be asking because we've seen situations where someone goes above and beyond and finds this thing and reports it. It's like, oh no, you're cheating, you're banned. It's like, but I was trying to help you guys. No, get out of here.
Yeah. The response was like, oh, I think it's something about cosmetics. We'll reward people. If I have the two options of discovering an exploit that gets me like millions of gold versus a pretty little top, I think I know what I'm going to pick. So I hope they think about their reward structure a little bit more.
I mean, if the exploit is something that is then trackable and you were doing it, we're obviously abusing it, then remove you. So,
If they catch me.
If they catch you.
Correct.
So I have a quick question from the forums for you guys about daily quests.
No.
And whether you would want Ashes of Creation, the mmorpg, to have them.
Daily quests are something that I think are generally misused in most games. They exist as a thing to make you want to come in, do a minimum activity, and then get out, or maybe stick around.
Rep grind.
And that's not very satisfying, but I like the idea that you can log in and a new objective that you didn't have before, though I would want it to be something more relevant. It's like, well, it's Tuesday now. Go kill 10 tacos.
Yeah, I mean, that's I guess, how do you define that? If it's selecting from 5 pools of 3 different potential random, 5 quest givers, and each one has 3 or 4 random things, after a few weeks, you've seen them all over and over and over. If it's disguised in a way that's literally hundreds of different variations of things in different locations that are not repetitive, okay. I mean, I guess I would then equate daily quest as to daily life in a game. It's just interacting with the world. That if they can make it look and feel that way, then sure. If it's the old classic World of Warcraft where you go to some node and there's 4 quest givers and you do the same 4 quests every day because you need 250 more, rep with, to get to 10,000, that kills it for me.
Right. I mean, not World of Warcraft. Everybody agrees that's a bad example.
Because that's where I was mentioning World Quests. Initially on the surface, hey, this is cool. This is just daily quests repackaged.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The idea that, again, this goes back to maybe having some permanence and, NPCs maybe remembering things. a vendor that you go to regular. Maybe once in a while you'll log in and you'll get a day, not a daily, but a thing that is current to that day. It's like, hey, I've got this, blah blah blah. It's I know that you're good at such and such, and I've asked a few other people. Nobody's really responded. I could really use your help. And so you have the opportunity. You could, go and talk to that person, see what they need help with, or just ignore it.
Right.
It's fine. They're an NPC. They'll get by.
Yeah. Are there other ways, if the purpose of a daily quest is to get, is a rep grind, a reputation grind, or, a grind to a weapon of some sort. If the only reason for it, so I guess, do I have other options to get reputation with that group? Like, you can leave in daily quests, but yes, can I ignore them and still go do something else that I can be rewarded with that group of whoever gives those quests?
Or the one that I always want, instead of a rep grind, can I just log my character out in your people's camp and we can assume that I'm like being productive and helping you guys while I'm offline instead of filling my experience bar? That would be sweet to like actually ingratiate myself with these people, but not a WoW thing.
So it sounds like it depends on how it's designed.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was saying. Okay. Sounds good.
All right. Well, we are near the only other thing that I wanted to mention. They commented on leaderboards. Crafting leaderboards are so dumb, but I will leave that there.
Oh, I'm just waiting to see what they are first before I can really pass any more judgment than I already have. I already think they're a bad idea, but I got to see them to know how bad. Or maybe somehow it end up being like the greatest thing ever.
Hey, Mom, I was the first to craft 100 iron swords.
Or if it's like, top farmer this week is so-and-so. Top crop that they were growing is this. It's like, oh, crap. They were growing this then? Everybody, grow this now.
So,
All
right.
Literally flavor of the week.
Yeah, they talked again about leaderboards. I think obviously that works just fine for PvP, PvE, even combat related stuff. Everyone's
kills, top experience.
Yeah, everyone's so focused on stats with that, anyways. The idea of crafter leaderboards is just, to an extent, even guild leaderboards I can understand, right? Knowing which guilds have done the most, that makes sense.
Player with the highest experience that hasn't died.
Yeah, so
hardcore.
One of the things I loved and hated about EverQuest 2, they had eq2players.com, which kept all of these sort of stats on who was the highest level priest and who was this and that. There's actually a wonderful story, I think I've told it before, about an exploiter who figured out how to dupe things within the auction house to retain the item and still get the money. And they got found out because these leaderboards, people started asking them, how did you get so many horses? How did you get all of this money? And that's how they were found out. But anyways, this has actually been a really good show, considering we had one dev stream. So hopefully...
Yeah. Well, I think we mentioned last time it's going to be a slow news cycle. Here we are.
Yeah. Hopefully next show we have another, and we have the, creative directors... something or other to tell us what glorious things are coming in 2020. So,
yeah.
All right.
Forward to it. Looking forward to getting Siege in here.
Yes. Hopefully that will be the big news as to when that will be. Oh, we didn't mention, I guess, what's it called? The Phoenix Initiative or something like that. So there are some people testing it currently, is my understanding. So hopefully that, I'm just saying, that means we're going to all get our hands on it sooner rather than later. So with that, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time. Have a good week.
See you later, folks.
See you next year.
Next year, indeed.